Your mother didn't get squat. So I watched this change in my family, based partially on the books I was writing. And I saw these things take place, and it never occurred to me that I could get near my father, or near to my father, by writing books he absolutely hated. And he said, and what my father loved to do, he said, "Hey son, the critics, they hate you." I said, "Well, thanks for pointing that out, Dad. I appreciate it. And you've always been so good for my career." He would memorize a bad review from the New York Times and recite it from memory at any party he was in Atlanta. But here is what I did not know when I began this journey as a writer. It never occurred to me that beautiful Southern mothers could die. And my mother died at 59, which now seems like a teenager. It seems young. And it devastated her 7 kids. Absolutely devastated. Devastated my father. We simply were not ready for it. We were not ready for a world that did not have Pat Conroy in it. And we aren't ready for it today. We just did not know. Then the most improbable thing happened. The great Santini began to die. And we watched this take place over a 2-year period. And he comes home with cancer toward the end of his life. I went to Dad and I said, he was in bed and he was never going to get out of that bed. I said, "Dad, I want to interview you. And I want to hear about your whole career as a Marine." And he began to tell me. By this time, my father's ego was up. And I learned the most extraordinary things about my father I ever knew. You know, I knew he was a bad father. I didn't know he had killed thousands of Koreans on bombing missions during the war. And he told me one story. He was the first pilots in there in Korea. And he said the job was to keep them away from the Nakton River, keep them north of the Nakton. So Dad was in the first squadron that went in, laying napalm in the Nakton. He surprised the North Korean battalion going across the Nakton River. He killed everyone in the battalion. I said, "How did you know you killed everyone, Dad?" He said, "I checked." I said, "How do you mean you checked? You were flying. You're too high to check." I said, "Wasn't that high? I got real low to check." And he said the river turned red with blood. And we were going back to the carrier when we got word that the guys in the Army and the Marine Corps had been pinned down for weeks by terrible artillery fire. And it was doing good to see the flyboys had come in. So my father and a friend of his, Bill Lundin, his wing, flew over 20 miles to these guys who were freezing, guys who were cold. And as they put their Corsairs over, Dad dipped his wings, the way he did the schoolyards, all through the South. And he said, "Son, 40,000 guys came roaring out of those trenches. 40,000 screaming at the top of their voice." He said, "I never forgot. I never forgot." When my father died, we did not know he had won a single medal. He had not told us. He won a zillion medals. At one time in the Marine Corps, he was the most decorated pilot in the Marine Corps. 5 Distinguished Service Crosses. His children had no idea, because we did not know the supremely violent man was a supremely modest one also. So I'm taking the stories of Dad and writing that, and my father suddenly realizes what I'm doing. He says, son, you're going to write another book about me, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I am, Dad. He said, your career has gone downhill since the great antique. I was always your best subject. And then he said, is there any Hollywood interest? I said, they're all begging for the part, Dad. Who wants to star in it? I said, Redford, Hoffman, Newman, everybody in Hollywood wants to play you, Dad. And he said, I'm sick of midgets playing me, son. I want you to handle this. As my father began to die, and those words still shock me, Dad was invincible. But by the way, I'm doing this and turning both ways because of Barack Obama. I never realized I was ignoring and insulting fully half the crowd until Obama became president. I just watched. And I asked Santa, I said, what's he looking at? He is back. But in my father's, in his last days, my father's last days on earth, he started, and the kids would want to come down and take care of it. Because as a kid, you always want to help your parents die right. You always want your parents to teach you how to die. And we wanted to give Dad the best we could. So all the kids came down, and we split it up, 6-hour intervals, where we were with him. My sister Carol, who's a poet in New York, she comes down, and I relieve her. I think Sandra was with me. And we relieved Carol at about 9 in the morning. And as I come up to the house, my sister Kathy's house, I hear Carol screaming at my father. You gotta tell me you love me, Dad. You gotta tell me you're proud of me, Dad. Tell me you love me. Tell me you're proud of me. She's screaming. So I go in, oldest brother, in command, in charge, civil bearing. I bid her to come out to speak with me. And I say, Carol, she's upset, she's crying. I say, Carol, it's very important for you to know something. Dad is dying, he is not deaf.